Bom dia a todos e a todas. Agora se inicia o evento Violação Internacional das Prerrogativas dos Advogados, promovido pela Comissão de Relações Internacionais e pela Comissão de Prerrogativas da Ordem dos Advogados do Brasil, Seccional do Distrito Federal. O evento contará com um elenco estelar de palestrantes e somente foi possível graças aos serviços competentes da equipe de eventos da OAB-DF, a quem agradeço nas pessoas de Veneranda, Rafael, Carla, pelo trabalho dos tradutores que já teve a oportunidade de ser o tradutor da doutora Ebade por 8 dias, quando ela esteve no Brasil, planejado para ir até o da diretoria da OAB-DF, o idioma principal será o inglês. Falará em face seu idioma do fato para o espanhol, disponível na parte de eventos da página oficial da OAB-DF na área relativa a esse seminário. Nos próximos dias, subiremos no YouTube as legendas em português. Passo a palavra agora ao presidente da OAB-DF para a sua saudação. Presidente, a palavra é sua.
Obrigado, Clarita. Quero inicialmente agradecer às pessoas do meu querido Nilton, da minha querida Clarita. Quero belo evento, alegria e uma honra para o OAB-DF poder sediar esse evento, para usar a expressão da Clarita, estelar. Da doutora Ebade, doutora em Direito, ativista em Direitos Humanos, laureada com o Nobel da Paz de 2003, do Direitos das Crianças, Mulheres e Refugiados em especial. É uma bandeira muito forte da nossa OAB-DF, é uma grande que nós temos também no nosso dia. Presidente da Fundação de Jornalistas e Escritores, que traz também grandes parceiros da nossa OAB. O doutor Jean Carboneira, membro da Advogados Sem Fronteiras, seja muito bem-vindo também, e obrigado, doutor Jean. Da ONG, o Dia do Advogado em Situação de Perigo, com sede em Haia, nos Países Baixos, representando aqui a doutora Simone, fico agradecendo a ele. Essa ONG ganhou o nome por conta do dia 24 de janeiro, como a Clarita já mencionou aqui, em 1970. Temos passado aqui no Brasil também, em todo o país, é um grande problema que nós temos enfrentado aqui também. O evento ficou do advogado em perigo por esse trágico evento. A doutora Sophie de Graaf, diretora executiva da ONG Advogados para Advogados. Professor de papel nos Estados Unidos. Agradeço. For us, OAB-DF, have you all here with us. I hope in the future registrar o meu pedido de desculpas por não poder acompanhar todo o evento, mas eu tenho agora no judiciário, no nosso poder judiciário. Então, eu tenho que representar a ordem lá junto com o nosso desse momento especial, dessa abertura, e deixo aqui meu sincero agradecimento e o meu desejo. Então, obrigado, Hilton, muito obrigado a todos os palestrantes e muito obrigado a todos que nos assistem, a todos que, de alguma forma,
Obrigada, presidente Délio. Houve algumas falhas na transmissão do seu áudio, nós inteiraremos oportunamente para a audiência, via YouTube, todo o inteiro teor da sua fala. Vejo que a doutora Lenda ainda não entrou online, eu passo a palavra ao doutor Newton Rubens para suas palavras de saudação a todos os palestrantes.
Obrigado, conselheira Clarita, presidente Délio, meu amigo doutor Sérgio, todos os palestrantes, aqueles que nos ouvem e nos assistem através do YouTube e também desse aplicativo Zoom, que nos oportuniza aqui essa conversa, esse diálogo institucional e internacional. Uma honra para todos nós, uma honra para mim poder participar desse evento, Violação Internacional de Prerrogativas do Advogado, prerrogativas tão caras às classes, seja da advocacia, do jornalismo, da magistratura, do Ministério Público, todos com seu papel importante em toda e qualquer sociedade democrática e republicana. Para nós, da OAB-DF, sempre uma oportunidade de aprendizado, de compartilhamento de informações, e parabenizo a conselheira Clarita pela protagonismo e pelo pioneirismo nesse trabalho de estudos comparados das prerrogativas da advocacia, e me coloco aqui também como ouvinte, um aprendiz, e fazer aqui, nessa oportunidade também, uma saudação e um agradecimento aos palestrantes, a doutora Ebade, como disse o presidente dela, já fez todo um registro importante, o doutor Kilik, Jean Carboneira, Hans Gasbeck e a Sofia Graf e o Mohamed Araf. Todos agradeço em nome de todo o sistema de prerrogativas da OAB-DF a participação e a oportunidade. Muito obrigado e um bom dia.
Bom dia, doutor Newton, muito obrigada pelas suas palavras. A doutora Lenda ainda não pôde se fazer presente, assim eu passo a parte de apresentação da doutora Ebade e a parte em que a apresentação fica em inglês. So it's a privilege to introduce to you the living legend that is Ms. Ebade, Shirin Ebade. Allow me a few words about Ms. Ebade, which world fame began in the same period when I first graduated in international relations at the University of Brasilia around 1999-2000. Shirin Ebade, born in June 21, 1947 in the Hamadan and raised in Tehran, is a proud mother of two highly educated women, both with PhD, married to a man as far-sighted as she is, and who, after the Islamic Revolution, went to the registry office to grant her equal rights in marriage. Born and raised in a family in which there was complete absence of any patriarchal posture from the father, which included equal treatment of their children. After the end of her studies, Ebadi applied as a judge and became the first female judge of Iran. In 1971, she finished her doctorate in private law, and in 1975 became president of the Tehran City Court. She is a prolific author, having written about a great plethora of themes in the juridical world. After the revolution, the frustrated promises of modernization, improvement of the rule of law and institutions led Ms. Ebadi being removed from the position of judge. She took up the practice of law and over time, understanding in her own words that women is a political category in Iran, actually in all the world, even in Brazil, she became a human rights lawyer numerous times pro bono. Dr. Ebadi is a voice on behalf of Islam, demonstrating that Islam, like all other faiths and creeds, has too many voices and interpretations, and that there is an intrinsic affinity of Islam with human rights, as there is between Christianity, Judaism, and many other faiths. It is enough to have a modern and up-to-date reading, as several denominations of the other faiths also did and do over time. Criticism of the Iranian regime is not a denial of Islamic faith, but of the political practice. What the Prophet intended to convey, adapted to our times, it is not a question that is not echoed in the other creeds. She fights for the modernization of Sharia. However, she is a critic to the Western understanding of the Islam as simplistic and prone to stereotypes. Following a research of one of her cases around 1999-2000, she found a sheet of paper with her death warrant officially signed. She was not a political opponent, she was just a lawyer. It was of absolutely no political advantage to the government if they killed her. And it showed, as she stated on one of her books, the incredible stupidity of a government that pronounced the death sentence on someone who was not even a political opponent. Her husband was captured and tortured with the aim of testifying against her. His alleged confessions were broadcasted twice on Iranian television. Her sister was captured just because she was her sister, to put pressure on her in order to silence her. The government confiscated her possessions and auctioned everything. And I could go on and on explaining the greatness of Ms. Ebadi, but she is the one you want to hear from now. So without further ado, Ms. Ebadi, it's a great honor to have you in the seminar. The floor is yours. Ms. Ebadi? You are muted, Ms. Ebadi. Ms. Ebadi, you're muted. I will unmute you. Just a second. Where are you? Are you? Yeah. You're muted. Pessoal da administração da OAB, por favor, me ajudem a desmutar a doutora Ebadi. Ela não está conseguindo fazer isso sozinha. Yeah, you're right.
سلام میکنم به دوستان و همکارانم. ممنون از اینکه این فرصت گفتگو رو به من دادید. من مایلم از قیامی که مردم ایران از ماه سپتامبر شروع کردن و وضعیت خاص وکلا در ایران امروز با شما صحبت بکنم، زیرا که ما در هفته وکلا در خطر هستیم و شما متوجه میشوید که در ایران همکارانتون با چه مشکلاتی مواجه هستند. در ماه سپتامبر مهسا دختر جوانی در خیابان توسط مأمورین امنیتی کشته شد و قتل او مانند کبریتی بود که به یک بشکه پر از بنزین زده شد و قیام مردم شروع شد. شعار ما در این انقلاب زن، زندگی و آزادی است. مردم مسالمت‌آمیز از ماه سپتامبر در بیش از 100 شهر علیه حکومت شعار میدن و مبارزه میکنند. خشم مردم به خاطر این است که مطالباتشون
ما میتونم
بدون جواب مونده. هر وقت مردم چیزی رو از حکومت طلب کردن و اعتراضی داشتن،
ما میتونم برم؟
این بار هم همین اتفاق افتاد.
من میرم.
بعد از کشتار مهسا و شروع قیام،
After the death of Mahsa and the start of the
حداقل
revolution,
520 نفر در خیابان کشته شدند.
more than 500 people were killed in the street by the government officials.
دستگیر شدند.
20,000 people arrested. Prisons were full,
زندانی‌ها رو
and the prisoners have been
استاندارد و دولتی نگهداری کنند.
kept in the unstandard buildings. 300 of the people have been students of the schools which were against the government.
از بین افراد کشته شده
Among the dead people,
68 نفرشون
68 people were under the 18 years old.
و برای اینکه بدانید چرا من میگویم
And to understand why I am telling about these, that people are don't have hope of justice in Iran, I will give you a simple example. I told you that Mahsa in September killed by the government officials, and they hit it on the head of her. Her mom and dad complained against police. Till now, they haven't received any result from the complaint. But the newspaper, the news reporter, the young woman news reporter that captured a picture of Mahsa in the hospital, and she attended the death ceremony of her, and she posted these issues and Iranian news reporting. She also captured, and she has to be in prison for a long time. And indeed, Iran is a land of where the people are ruling the country, where they killing people is not prohibited. But if you report against government, it's a big crime. Killer of Mahsa is free, but the reporter who has reported this issue is now in prison. And the important and sad point is that when a judge who was defending the Mahsa, she is also in prison. Now she is released with an expensive from the September month that the people have started their revolution and protest, more than 50 judges have been captured by the government and punished. And why? This is why you were complaining for for justice in the country. Numbers of these judges are in the prison. 10 of the judges that are now in prison, and the rest are released by one of these reporters, one of these judges that have been for 4 years in the prison because she was defending the rights of human beings against the government. And she was 4 years earlier, she was protesting this. She had 2-time heart attack in the prison. Even the government doctor has not let her to stay in prison. The doctor said that she needs to go to hospital. She don't have to be in prison. She needs to go to home and have rest and to have treat. His name is Muhammad Najafi. He is in Iraq prison, one of the cities of Iran. He is in prison now, and he had 2-time heart attack. I'm here now requesting from Brazilian officials or our colleagues to support the judges that are now in prison, the Iranian judge that in prison, especially Muhammad Najafi, and because he is sick and they are not letting him to go to hospital, and it's serious. Muhammad Najafi was my colleague. He was working in my NGO, and we were working together for many years, and we have defended from the rights of the people from many and for many years. But the result of defending from the people's right is not to be in prison. But now Najafi is in prison and very sick. You know me that I am defending for the right of the people. I have lost all of my properties. They closed my accounts. They captured my father's home because I was not in Iran. They couldn't capture me, so they gave all my properties. My sister and my husband has captured by them. They were in prison for a period of time. These are not only for me. These happen not only for me. This happened to all the judges, to many the judges of that who have defeated the rights of people. They have gone to prison. Indeed, the government don't like people who are against the government to be judges. And because of this, 3 years before, one law has passed in Iran that people who are accused that they are against the government and they captured, they don't have the right to have their own lawyer when there is their cases in the if they want to have a lawyer for themselves, they have to have a lawyer that the government is appointing for them. People who are captured by them in prison, they are torturing them seriously, and they're asking them, forcing them to confess that they are wrong. So when their case is going to the for the judge, then they have the right to select their own judges, liar. When they are going to the for the judge, they says we have tortured, but the court don't listen to them. And when they says we are tortured, the court don't listen to them. Even they don't respect the liar who was defending the person who has been tortured. So they says, why do you are talking against the government? All these events because courts in Iran are not independent. And all of them are spy and government officials who have telling the courts authorities to what to do and what to decide. Our protests in Iran, people's protests in Iran always have been peaceful, and they were coming for their rights in the streets, protesting their rights. And these events, 20,000 people were captured and 4 people were hanged. And many of them are
به جرم رقصیدن در خیابان هر کدام به 10 سال حبس محکوم شدن و الان زندانن. نزدیک به 100 نفر دادستان برای 100 نفر درخواست حکم اعدام کرده که یکی از اینا فقط به خاطر خواندن یک ترانه رپ دستگیر شده بود. حکومت مسلماً سقوط میکنه برای اینکه بیش از 90% مردم علیه این حکومت هستند. همه راه‌های ممکن رو مردم امتحان کردند که حکومت حاضر بشه حرف مردم رو گوش کنه. متاسفانه به هیچ وجه موفق نشدند.
They have not had any success in any way, and now people have reached this conclusion that there is no way out except getting rid of this government. And for this reason, the
مثل قطاری است که به راه افتاده و ایستگاه آخرش سقوط رژیمه. البته میدانیم سقوط یک رژیم یک پریود یک دوره ای داره و این دوره طی میشه. گاهی از اوقات اعتراضات خیلی اوج میگیره و گاهی اوقات صدای اعتراض برای مدت کوتاهی خاموش میشه، اما 2 مرتبه شروع میشه و به هر حال هیچ وقت جامعه آروم نیست و علت نارضایتی مردم فقط خشونت بالای حکومت نیست، بلکه گسترش فقر هم هست. الان 1/3 مردم ایران زیر خط فقر، یعنی حتی غذای روزانه رو هم نمیتونن تهیه کنن.
منو میوت کردم.
خب من صحبت میکنم.
نه نمیدونم چرا کردم. اونا کردم.
من صحبت.
نصف خط فقر در ایران.
The poverty line in Iran is very high and people don't have their income. No one can do with a small income to have a proper and normal life in Iran. And everyone have to work in 2 or 3 places, 2 or 3 times. If you can find a job, because the unemployment level is high in Iran. One of the important problems in Iran, the disagreement of governments inside the government in Iran, and the root is the root of poverty in Iran is the in the government. People are having hope for their future. They know that if they come together and fight for their rights, what we have seen now in Iran, what is happening, and they know that they can be the winner. They can achieve their rights. Fortunately, there is no violence in these protests, and people are peacefully going for their rights and protesting peacefully for their rights in the streets. But people have been fighting against the bullets of the police, and sometimes they have faced with the different type of violation and shooting to them by guns, and they have faced with tear gas also, and with many times of shooting. They have killed many people, and this is the reason when they are shooting on the group of the people, and one of these are shooting on their eyes, and many of the youngsters have been blind by this shooting and these protests. It has been increased that the eye doctors of Iran have protested that the level of blind people who have shot by police in the protest is very high, and the doctor requested to the police officials to be careful with shooting on the eyes of the people. These are the issues that are going on in Iran. I will cut my speech because I want to give the floor to answer your questions. And final, I want to thank for you guys to give us to talk about my rights of my people and my colleagues to talk about this with you. Thank you very much.
So, just a second. So thank you very much for your intervention, your speech, Ms. Abadi. As I told you, it's for me a great honor and an unbelievable privilege to have you here with us. We have online now the vice president, vice chair of the Brazilian Bar Association. Sorry, the Brazilian. Just a second. The Brazilian Bar Association, the vice chair, Linda Tariana, he's a descendant of Lebanese, not actually Persia, but Middle Eastern origins as well. I have the honor to pass the word to her for her brief welcoming words to you, Ms. Abadi, and all the participants. Linda, por gentileza, a palavra é sua para as palavras de saudação.
Olá, bom dia a todos. Muito emocionante, impactante participar desse evento hoje aqui, que eu acho que é um divisor de águas recebê-la aqui em nossa casa, que esse evento de hoje se perpetue por meio dos nossos meios de comunicação, porque nós precisamos conhecer a história e tudo que foi dito aqui deve ser lembrado, deve ser rememorado, deve ser refletido sobre uma forma de preservar a nossa atuação na advocacia. As prerrogativas da advocacia, elas são importantes, porque marcam uma linha muito tênue entre aquele que é acusado e aquele que acusa. O papel da advocacia é ser um mediador dessas forças. Essas prerrogativas, elas precisam ser preservadas para manter o equilíbrio, repito, entre o acusador e o acusado. E histórias como essa, que foram ditas aqui, tão atuais, são importantes para que a gente tenha consciência da importância que é da preservação das prerrogativas. Eu gostaria de parabenizar a nossa comissão pelo evento, aqui na pessoa da Clarita, da querida Joyce, do Sérgio, do Cyrus. Queria parabenizar pelo altíssimo nível do evento que está sendo aqui exposto. Agradecer mais uma vez, é uma honra imensa estar aqui ouvindo a nossa Nobel da Paz, emocionante, impactante, repito, ouvir tudo aquilo que foi dito aqui, essas histórias tão reais, tão duras e tão importantes para que a gente saiba da importância. Gostaria de parabenizar por toda a história, por todo o legado, toda a sua luta, milita em prol de mulheres, milita em prol da cidadania, milita em prol da advocacia, muito além das fronteiras, chegando até mesmo aqui no Brasil. Então, gostaria de agradecer imensamente e parabenizo mais uma vez o evento de todos aí. Sucesso, parabéns.
Obrigada, doutora Lenda, é uma honra tê-la como nossa vice-presidente, você sabe disso, da admiração que eu tenho por você. Doutora Abadi, ela é talvez a mais nova mulher a ter essa posição em alguma seccional da Ordem dos Advogados do Brasil, né? Como vice-presidente, com uma liderança, uma elegância, uma assertividade, assim, realmente admiráveis. Eu sou uma fã, você sabe disso, Lenda, e todos os que me ladeiam nas reuniões do Conselho sabem disso. Cada intervenção sua é sempre um elogio. Eu passo agora a palavra...
Peraí, já que você permitiu, ó, deixa eu apresentar aqui a minha pequena, que está aqui sempre me acompanhando. Estar com ela representa muito, né? Significa muito para todos nós. Então, faço questão dela sempre estar comigo aqui, porque é uma vitória, não só minha, não só dela, mas de todas as mulheres. Obrigada.
Em um dos livros da doutora Ebadi, ela fala que ela ganhou forças, né? Se inspirou, ganhou forças nas próprias filhas. Ela é mãe de duas mulheres hoje, né? Doutoras, para lutar a favor dos direitos das mulheres, dos direitos humanos. Então, com certeza, essa força da maternidade aí, o maternar mulher, né, ganha todo um significado na militância advocatícia, né? A doutora Ebadi sorrindo, feliz, porque sabe, né, sente essa força, né?
E se me permite, Clarita, só encerrar falando que a força da doutora Ebadi para as filhas delas reverberam e chegam até a minha filha aqui também, viu? Saiba que o trabalho dela atinge aqui também. Muito obrigada.
O nível de inspeção da senhora, doutora Ebadi. Eu passo agora a palavra ao doutor Sérgio Martins Costa, ele é vice-presidente da Comissão de Relações Internacionais e vai apresentar a nossa próxima palestrante, a Simone Gasbeck, que vai substituir o doutor Hans Gasbeck. I pass the word to Mr. Sérgio Martins Costa. He's the Vice Chair of the International Relations Commission of the Committee of the Brazilian Bar Association Brazilian Section. He will introduce Ms. Simone Gasbeck, who will substitute Hans Gasbeck from the NGO, the Day of the Endangered Lawyer. We had to have here a little, change in our programmation due to the special situation of Mr. Gasbeck, who is ill and was not able to be present now. So, Mr. Sergio, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, my name is Simone Gasbeck. I'm chair of the Foundation Day of the Endangered Lawyer. And I work as a lawyer in Haarlem in Holland. And together with my husband, I own a law firm in which we mostly worked pro bono. And I have been asked to tell you something about the history and the background of the Day of the Endangered Lawyer that we founded. It's a great honor to be able to speak to you today. This Day of the Endangered Lawyer, it has been around for about 14 years this year. In those years, we have been drawing attention to threatened human rights lawyers throughout the year, but especially so on the 24th of each January of each year. We have nominated this 24th January of each year the Day of the Endangered Lawyer. And what is done on this day, in very short, is to demonstrate throughout the world with lawyers in rope to organize and present programs such as this, to hold conferences, issue public statements, etc. And it's all about threatened lawyers in one country that is chosen on beforehand. Some years ago, all the lawyers' organizations that took part in the activities of the Day of the Endangered Lawyer, they were invited by us to Brussels to a live meeting, and there a partnership was created. This partnership is called the Coalition, and nowadays this coalition consists of more than 40 lawyers' organizations from Europe and abroad, and we hope it will expand even more. 2 years ago, we asked the coalition to take over the yearly work of organizing this event because it became a lot of work. In the past, we focused on countries like Turkey, Colombia, Azerbaijan, Iran, the Philippines, and this year on the 24th, especially on Afghanistan, where many lawyers, and especially female lawyers, are harassed or even worse, murdered. You may wonder if this work has any effect. In the case of Afghanistan, I'm very glad to say that the ambassador received us, our protesting group of lawyers. They received us with great hospitality in Holland and much sympathy also for our efforts for the lawyers in his home country, especially the female lawyers. What we as organization hope to achieve is at first global awareness about the plight of lawyers and the necessity to have an unhindered system of lawyers, prosecutors, judges to maintain or get the state of law. And we hope that due to global pressure in many countries on the same day, on the same time, that these kind of gatherings and demonstrations, that government think about this, that the government of a country that is affected does not like that. We always think water is stronger than stone, one drop at a time. It irritates at first, but eventually there will be a hole in the stone. On the 24th of January and around, such as today by your organization, activities are organized in more than 40 cities worldwide on different continents. For example, The Hague, my country, Manila, Brasilia, where we are now, New York, Brussels, a lot of cities in Turkey, all places in Europe. Lawyers in all these cities, they offer the same report to the ambassadors of the country, of Afghanistan in this case, translated into Afghanistan language. So there are those ambassadors everywhere with that text that they send to their Afghan government, or they say what has happened with our reports attached to it. And those governments won't like that. Government leaders are usually after economic benefits for themselves or for their country. And if government leaders see that their human rights policy is being rejected worldwide, this rejection may be a reason for a repressive regime to make a maybe small turn in ideas, so that they will be able to continue their activities with other countries, especially their economic interest safeguarding. We see that sometimes special things happen, like we demonstrated a few years ago at the Turkish embassy. That was another kind of demonstration. We were with a few lawyers. It was on behalf of our Turkish colleagues who are from who are very many in prisons. We do those demonstrations there more often. And we wanted to hand over a petition, but the door stayed closed of the embassy. And next day, 2 major Turkish newspapers, they published articles about this event, and especially they echoed our criticism of the Turkish embassy and of the Turkish government. They explained what we were doing there, and they said it was very rude, that the door was not open. Among them, undoubtedly, many people in Turkey who support our actions on behalf of all those lawyers and judges and prosecutors in prison there. So you must realize that in Turkey, lawyers are persecuted because they defend lawyers or judges or prosecutors. And what we regularly hear also, and that's also for us very important, that these actions strongly support the lawyers and their relatives in the countries concerned. This support gives colleagues the strength to continue with their work that is so important for their clients. It's human rights work. It's about clients who are evicted from their homes or land, or country without any form of process. People who are detained because they belong to a certain population group. It's about clients who have a certain religion, clients who simply wear the wrong clothes. During the year, we maintain contact with those colleagues and relatives of threatened or murdered lawyers. Our organization supports them mentally and sometimes financially, thanks to gifts. And finally, we always think if you do nothing, nothing will happen anyway. Regimes can then continue repression unhindered. And sometimes you only need one person to initiate change. If one of an employee within such an embassy, of somebody who reads a paper or somebody who watched a program is changed by our action, this will ultimately affect a larger circle around him or her. Our Day of the Endangered Lawyer also started with only one lawyer. He was in the shower, my husband, and he said, we should organize a Day of the Endangered Lawyer. And that's how things like this start to work. You only need one person sometimes. And now it is a globally organized organization. There's worldwide support. The Coalition for the Endangered Lawyer is striving for recognition of the day by the United Nations. And we get larger every year. We have been interviewed by many lawyer magazines, even by the Australian Law magazine, the bar organizations of 8 countries, including United States, Japan, Canada. They have adopted a motion in a side event of the 2017 G7 conference that they support the Day of the Endangered Lawyer and encourage other countries to do the same. Last week, I spoke to the New York Bar Association. So the organization is growing every year. And it would be great if also Brazilian organization could join. Send us a mail and to the Day of the Endangered Lawyer. You'll find it on the internet. And we will see that you also can join the coalition. Even small groups or individuals are very welcome to join. And thank you very much for organizing this meeting. And thank you very much for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simone Gasbeck. Well, your talk was very inspiring. I would like to propose a development, or at least continue on your metaphor of the water is stronger than stone, because of course, one drop of water is of little impact. However, an ocean is unstoppable. So this work that you do of congregating lawyers all across the globe, it's indeed a very strong and very meaningful work. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join it and to be part of it somehow. I would like now to continue the event presenting Mr. Mehmet Kilik, which is the president of the Journalists and Writers Foundations. This organization protects and defends prerogatives of both these professional categories worldwide. And well, it is just like lawyers, journalists and writers are also bastions of democracy and of rights promotion. So please, Mr. Mehmet Kilik, you have the floor.
Good morning and greetings to you all from New York. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Brazilian Bar Association and Mr. Sergi and Ms. Clarita Mia, the chair of the International Relations Committee at the Brazilian Bar Association, for this invitation. I think this is an important event, and I'm here on behalf of the Journalists and Writers Foundation. Personally, it's an honor to be a part of such an esteemed group of panelists and guests. I would like to talk about the international violation of lawyers' prerogatives with perspectives from Turkey. Since 2016, our organization has closely monitored the erosion of the rule of law in Turkey, including the deteriorating situation of the independence of judiciary, judges, and lawyers in the country. I will try to be brief in my remarks and I will leave you to draw your own conclusions. To better understand the points, I will try to focus on the events before and after the attempted coup in 2016. Now, let me begin with the situation before the attempted coup. The judiciary in Turkey has never been perfect by any standard, but I think it is fair to say that before 2014, it was constantly improving, with the legal profession and the judiciary slowly gaining their role among other powers, such as the legislative and the executive. I think many of you would agree that the autocratic regimes cannot coexist with a functioning democracy and the rule of law. Therefore, it was the first time that, it was the first to be targeted as potential threat to the government's objectives. You have certainly heard about the attempted coup of 2016, but you may be very surprised if I told you that before the coup attempt, the government of Turkey claimed another attempt, that is what the government called as the judicial coup in 2014. In December 2013, one of the biggest scandals in the history of Turkey unfolded. Police officers raided several homes and confiscated around 17.5 million in cash, money allegedly used for bribery. All the 52 individuals detained were connected in various ways with the ruling Justice and Development Party, and 4 ministers resigned. Then Prime Minister Erdogan and his son was in line to be prosecuted. The response by the government was simple. Instead of supporting the judiciary in upholding the rule of law, the government called this a judicial coup attempt aimed at overthrowing the government. In brief, to achieve its goals towards a more autocratic regime, the government changed the powers of the Constitutional Court and the High Council of Judges and Public Prosecutors. The parliament then adopted new law, shifting the power to appoint members from one of the chambers of the plenary of the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors to the Minister of Justice. He immediately appointed 2 pro-government members in their place. This opened the door for mass reassignment and dismissals, with judges and prosecutors involved in the investigations were replaced with pro-government judges. In February of 2014, a new law restructures the High Council of Judges and Public Prosecutors to tie it closer to the executive branch. And in 2014, a new category of criminal courts of peace was created for criminal investigations. The courts of the peace came increasingly under government control. Finally, by October 2014, following the election to the High Council of Judges and Public Prosecutors, the government secured control of the judiciary. As you know, autocratic regimes, however, aim not only to control the judiciary, but for its full control. And this is what really happened after the attempted coup in Turkey. Under the amendments to the Constitution approved in the referendum of April 2017, the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors was reduced from 22 members to 13 regular members, and the President of Turkey directly appoints 4 of them. The Minister of Justice and his Undersecretary, who are members of the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors, are also appointed by the President, and that makes 6 out of 13. And the remaining 7 members of the council are appointed by the Grand National Assembly. Prior to the amendments, the President was responsible for appointing only 3 members out of 22 regular members of the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors, but the majority of the members of the council were appointed by their peers. So what happened, after the coup attempt? On July 16, 2016, a day after the failed coup, the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors suspended a first round of 2,745 judges and prosecutors at once, and whose names were published in a list on grounds of being members of an armed terrorist organization labeled as FETÖ by the government. So it does not take too much analysis to figure out what happened. In the morning of July 16, the attempted coup was still ongoing in some places. The same day, the government has the list of 2,745 judges and prosecutors and suspends them in connection with the attempted coup while it was still ongoing. First, it is not possible physically to draw the lists of legal professionals throughout Turkey in few hours, not to mention investigating on their individual guilt related to the attempted coup. Second, legal professionals who had died before the attempted coup were also included in the list, which clearly proves that the lists were drafted months before the attempted coup. Then on July 19th, 2,740 judges and prosecutors, almost everyone suspended, and they were detained. By the end of July, according to the Minister of Interior, 1,684 judges and prosecutors had been placed in pre-trial detention. On July 23rd, 2017, the Independent Association of Judges and Prosecutors, which is called YARSAV, was dissolved and its assets were frozen without any judicial proceedings. In December 2016, the Minister of Justice announced that 3,820 judges and prosecutors were being investigated and 2,430 of them were still detained. Until now, 4,463 have been dismissed, and most, if not all of them, are either detained or arrested. Now let's come back to the lawyers. What happened to the lawyers? As regards to the lawyers, by December 2021, more than 1,600 lawyers were arrested. 615 lawyers were detained. 474 lawyers were sentenced to a total of about 3,000 years of imprisonment on grounds of membership of an armed terrorist organization or spreading terrorist propaganda. In parallel with the crackdown against the legal professions, the government also needed to hire loyalist judges and prosecutors and continue to persecute critical lawyers. Following her visit to Turkey in July 2019, the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Dünya Mijatovic, published the report in February 2020. Her report focuses on 2 main issues raised during her visit. First, the administration of justice and protection of human rights in the justice system. And the second one is human rights defenders and civil society. In her report, the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe noted that according to the figures provided by the Turkish High Council of Justice, during her visit, 9,914 judges and prosecutors had been recruited after the declaration of the state of emergency in 2016. She noted with concern in her report that loyalty to the ruling government appears to have become a key criterion for selection. So let me put it in perspective. Imagine if more than 1/3 of the Brazilian judges and prosecutors were dismissed and most of them were detained. Imagine the total number of current judges and prosecutors are hired in the last 2 or 3 years, with major criterion being loyal to the government. And again, imagine thousands of lawyers were persecuted only for exercising their profession, taking part in a press conference, being present or near a protest, advising clients of their right to remain silent, or defending suspects charged with terrorism. You would not be wrong in concluding that the independence of judiciary has now been eroded to its core in Turkey. Many times, I do feel the same. People are now sentenced for even being followed on Twitter by someone else and for visiting certain web pages or complaining about the government's actions. I have to be frank, the international community has been very vocal on the crackdown against the legal professions in Turkey. However, we have very little results. The crackdown is still ongoing, and I'm here, however, to ask from all of you to support the Turkish judges, prosecutors, and lawyers, and for the return of Turkey to the rule of law and democracy. They need, the people in Turkey and the lawyers, judges, prosecutors, they need our help. And for those in prison and outside of prison, any help will be welcomed. We have a shared responsibility to stand firm to the crackdown against the legal profession. In Brazil, the United States, and other countries, including Netherlands and other countries in Europe and across the globe, we have a real responsibility to support the independence of judiciary and the rule of law. And thank you so much again for inviting me, for giving a voice to lawyers, prosecutors, and judges in Turkey. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiley. It was an account, a very vivid account of the situation in Turkey, and thank you for bringing awareness of that difficult situation that lawyers, prosecutors, and judges face there. And I hope that we can find ways of supporting the rule of law in Turkey. Thank you very much for your participation. I would like now to yield the floor to Mr. Jean Carboneira. He's a Brazilian, and he is the member of the Lawyers Without Borders in Brazil. Dr. Jean Carboneira, advogado e membro dos Advogados Sem Fronteiras no Brasil. You have the floor.
Bom dia, good morning. Eu preparei a minha fala em português, né? Mas antes eu quero falar com a Simone. My dear Simone, I want to send my wishes to my best friend, Hans Hasbeck, and from the speedy recovery of his health, our colleague for many years, co-founder of Lawyers Without Borders Network, and how we work together sometimes in the Day of the Endangered Lawyer. So I hope he can be well as soon as possible. So my hugs to my best friend, Hans. Thank you, Simone.
You are very welcome. I will send your regard, and he gave me the task to give his regards to you, and he told me about the special work you do together and the friendship there is. So thank you. I will certainly say so.
Thank you very much. Então, eu sou o Jean Carbonara, sou o presidente da Advogados Sem Fronteiras no Brasil, junto com o Hans e Simone e tantos outros advogados pelo mundo das associações locais Advogados Sem Fronteiras. Nós fundamos em 2009 a Rede Internacional Advogados Sem Fronteiras, então colocando mais de 20 entidades de ASFs pelo mundo trabalhando em conjunto em algumas ações orquestradas, algumas parceria de 2, 3, outras em conjunto, e viemos trabalhando aí em diversas ações. Uma delas, uma das principais, é justamente acompanhar casos de advogados que, pelo exercício da sua profissão, são ameaçados, perseguidos, e têm o seu desempenho e o fato de proporcionar o acesso à justiça dos seus patrocinados, dos seus clientes, às vezes dificultado, às vezes, inclusive, impossibilitado. E temos feito, então, ao longo do tempo, junto com outras entidades, porque é um trabalho árduo e sozinho é impossível fazer, e a gente vê por esse evento de hoje, como temos diversas entidades e diversas pessoas unidas na luta por essa garantia de direitos que a gente costuma sempre dizer que garantir os direitos dos advogados é garantir o direito da população, porque o advogado ele não luta pelo seu direito, ele está lutando quando exerce a sua profissão e luta pelo direito de exercê-la, é para defender os interesses daqueles a quem ele representa, o tão falado acesso à justiça. E nessa linha, eu quero perpassar por alguns pontos, uns mais amplos e outros mais específicos. Eu começo falando de algo que tem a ver com tecnologia. A pandemia, ela veio acelerar alguns avanços tecnológicos e de uma forma que, em geral, nós vemos positiva. Porém, esses avanços tecnológicos, em muitos países, o Brasil é um deles, veio de uma forma tão rápida que muitos advogados não conseguiram se adaptar a essas mudanças. Os tribunais, as audiências, em sua maioria, passaram a ser virtuais, como esse encontro que nós temos. Nós tivemos os processos já rapidamente digitalizados, e nós sabemos que, pode-se dizer que a maioria dos advogados tem uma boa familiaridade com as tecnologias, mas muitos, com idade mais avançada, e que são uma grande parte da nossa classe, da nossa categoria, aqueles que têm menos recursos financeiros, e isso no Brasil, que o Brasil a gente tem uma boa relação com tecnologia, nós temos bancos digitais de ponta, nós temos muitas coisas tecnológicas que são avançadas. Porém, o direito ele sempre foi algo mais tradicional, vamos dizer assim. E, embora a gente tenha muitos avanços, nós temos muitos advogados com dificuldades financeiras, de equipamentos, de conexão à internet, em vários lugares do país. A gente se fala dos centros urbanos, que é onde a maioria de nós aqui está acostumado a gente vive, onde a gente trabalha, a Ordem dos Advogados de Brasília, que está na capital, a gente tem muita facilidade, embora em Brasília mesmo eu tenha vivenciado pessoas utilizando ali na sede de coworking, advogados um pouco mais idade, que não pediam ajuda para conseguir peticionar, conseguir acessar documentos em processos digitais. Isso a gente, falando novamente em termos de Brasil, onde a gente tem uma boa relação. Eu estive recentemente, no início de janeiro, no Peru. No Peru eu pude ver como o acesso à justiça está sendo dificultado justamente e isso aconteceu por conta da pandemia ter acontecido de uma forma tão rápida. Os tribunais tinham recursos e os advogados não conseguiram acompanhar isso. No Brasil, como eu disse, isso já vinha acontecendo há algum tempo. Em outros países, foi da noite para o dia. E isso, embora não seja tão chocante quanto esses casos que a gente acompanha de advogados ameaçados, perseguidos, assassinados, isso atinge a classe dos advogados de uma forma tão mais ampla, acontece com um número tão maior de advogados que a gente não percebe, mas acaba trazendo um impacto muito forte para toda a advocacia e para toda a sociedade, essa dificuldade que muitos advogados estão tendo de acompanhar essas mudanças tecnológicas que acontecem principalmente nos tribunais, no judiciário, mas em outros setores em que os advogados precisam atuar. Então, embora seja um tema que pareça destoar um pouco, né, das prerrogativas dos advogados, mas é uma preocupação que a gente tem começado a levantar, porque nós temos visto no Brasil também, mas em outros países da América Latina, que, pelo menos no meu caso, tenho tido mais experiência nesse período, de grande dificuldade do acesso à justiça, justamente pela dificuldade de ter acesso às tecnologias pelos advogados. E agora eu entro numa outra seara que tem a ver com isso, e depois eu volto e junto as duas, a parte da tecnologia, com essa questão vamos dizer assim, da forma de tirar dos advogados os seus direitos para prejudicar direitos mais amplos, quais sejam. Eu não vou entrar em detalhes de países, porque os meus colegas aqui palestrantes já explicaram com muito detalhe várias coisas, e nós temos, depois eu posso passar um site para quem estiver interessado em se aprofundar mais, onde nós temos detalhadamente as violações de direitos de advogados em todos esses países, mas eu quero fazer só um apanhado geral sobre como nós temos estudado as violações de prerrogativas pelo mundo e como elas, teoricamente, se dividem em termos de países. A gente tem visto advogados que têm sido ameaçados, presos, torturados, perseguidos em diversos países. As motivações, elas mudam de país a país. A prática, ela é muito parecida. E o advogado, via de regra, é a vítima, porque o advogado é aquele que levanta a voz para defender quem está sendo perseguido, quem está sendo ameaçado, e acaba sendo o alvo preferido de governos, de organizações do crime organizado, de grupos extremistas. E se nós citarmos alguns países como, por exemplo, e não é exclusividade, são apenas onde a gente encontrou mais casos mais numerosos, o que não quer dizer que seja onde acontecem mais casos também, porque muitas vezes, em alguns países, a gente não consegue ter acesso às informações, mas que nós temos muitos casos relatados. Países em que o principal violador, diretamente, dos direitos dos advogados é o governo, e isso tem relação direta com os direitos políticos, os direitos e a liberdade política e ideológica. China, em primeiro lugar, também, obviamente, pela quantidade da população, é onde teria uma quantidade maior de casos. Mas sabemos, né, que a repressão aos advogados na China é muito forte e presente há muito tempo. A Turquia, onde vários colegas aqui acompanham casos, a Turquia tem toda uma questão étnica, uma questão de disputas políticas territoriais, e advogados de grupos que são opositores ao governo são presos, são vítimas de perseguição, uma atrás da outra. É uma situação bastante complicada. Aqui na América Latina temos Venezuela e Nicarágua, onde acontecem casos também de muita perseguição por conta das ideologias políticas. Já em outros países, nós temos acompanhado um tipo diferente, onde não há uma participação direta do governo, mas ou há uma complacência dos governos, ou há até uma certa indireta causa por conta de políticas governamentais. Exemplos são Colômbia, México e Filipinas. Relatos, novamente, são apenas exemplos, onde temos numerosos casos de advogados que são perseguidos, ameaçados, assassinados por conta, e geralmente por questões ligadas ao crime organizado. São advogados que defenderam traficantes arrependidos, que fazem a sua colaboração premiada, ou advogados que defendem grupos vulneráveis que estão, muitas vezes, em áreas que são de interesse do crime organizado. Nesses países, Colômbia, México, Filipinas, muito relacionado à guerra às drogas. E aí representa uma política governamental, que é a política de guerra às drogas, onde se, ao invés de políticas de segurança pública que venham a diminuir os conflitos, não se empreende um conflito, se cria uma guerra interna, onde o conflito ele é cada vez ampliado por conta do combate ao tráfico de drogas, e isso acaba trazendo problemas para todas as comunidades que estão envolvidas. Isso no Brasil se viveu bastante também. E outra vertente de violações aos direitos dos advogados é em relação aos defensores de direitos humanos em geral. E aí nós temos os defensores da liberdade religiosa, de orientação sexual, os direitos das mulheres, defensores de determinadas etnias, onde nós temos aí homicídios muito frequentes, prisões, torturas, de forma diversa e com diferentes graus de participação dos governos. E aí nós podemos citar a Rússia, o Irã, o Paquistão, onde nós, através da Advogados Sem Fronteiras, acompanhamos o caso da Asia Bibi, tempos atrás. Eu fui um dos responsáveis por acompanhar o caso, e os advogados foram perseguidos e pessoas foram assassinadas no decorrer dos 9 anos da sua prisão. O Egito é um outro país onde isso acontece de forma contumaz, e a Arábia Saudita também, né, onde a gente conhece inúmeros casos. E importante entender também, quando a gente visualiza essas relações, o que acontece nesses países, por quê e quem apoia políticas que levam a essas violações. A gente também tem que ver quem são os parceiros desses países, né? Porque muitas vezes a gente olha de fora, nós estamos aqui no Brasil, ou nós estamos num país europeu, num país democrático, onde essas coisas não acontecem, mas o nosso país, as empresas dos nossos países estão fazendo negócios com aqueles governos, estão fazendo negócios com aquelas empresas que estão sediadas naqueles países e que indiretamente estão apoiando, muitas vezes financiando os responsáveis por essas violações de direitos que ocorrem nesses países. Então, muitas vezes a gente pensa, nós estamos aqui em outro país, o que nós podemos fazer são notas à imprensa para repudiar atos específicos que estão acontecendo, mas a gente não percebe que os políticos do nosso país estão, de certa forma, sendo parceiros dessas violações ao fazer negócios com eles, ao não tomar nenhuma atitude diplomática que possa fazer com que essas violações cessem. Então, muitas vezes, a gente precisa entender que uma ação mais enérgica dentro do nosso próprio país, com os nossos governantes, pode auxiliar bastante a cessar essas violações nesses outros países, quando elas não ocorrem nos nossos países. E a terceira, onde eu quero chegar, falei em tecnologia no início, e falei sobre as violações, principalmente de países e governos e órgãos do poder judiciário autoritários, uma preocupação crescente que vem acontecendo no mundo inteiro, que é uma escalada de um certo tipo de extremismo que tem se apossado do termo liberdade e usa esse termo como um laissez-passer, né, como uma porta aberta para o cometimento de crimes contra a honra, contra a democracia, como uma liberdade sem limites para disseminar falsas informações, e isso é tudo feito pela internet, com tecnologia, utilizando redes sociais, utilizando as mais diversas redes sociais, diversos tipos de aplicativos, principalmente de comunicação, que fazem envio em massa de notícias falsas, que fazem com que informações cheguem a pessoas que não têm discernimento para entender, e acaba se criando efeitos de manada. E qual é a principal preocupação com relação a isso? Bom, e esse tipo de tecnologia e esse tipo de extremismo que usa a liberdade como um pressuposto para poder ir além, né, cometer excessos em nome de uma suposta liberdade, isso por si, obviamente, já causa grandes estragos, já causa grandes prejuízos, não apenas a advogados, mas a variados grupos. Mas a preocupação, e é por isso que eu cito nesse nosso encontro, nesse nosso evento, esse tipo de preocupação, e principalmente sabendo e citando essa dificuldade que o direito, o nosso sistema de justiça tem para lidar com essas novas tecnologias, essas novas formas de relações entre as pessoas, entre as instituições, é que esse tipo de excesso está, e não em diversos países do mundo, está provocando uma contrapartida autoritária de censura, de supressão de direitos, que é mais ou menos comparável ao que ocorreu logo após o 11 de setembro, que nós, após um fato específico, cometido por terroristas, o mundo inteiro se tornou um lugar mais triste. Nós tivemos inúmeras liberdades suprimidas por conta de um fato específico que não se conseguiu evitar que esses atos terroristas acontecessem, e foi um único ato. E hoje nós vemos isso acontecer de forma espalhada pelo mundo todo. Nós tivemos no Brasil fatos parecidos, e aí é interessante comentar sobre isso justamente num evento que é organizado pela Comissão de Relações Internacionais, pela Comissão de Prerrogativas da OAB do Distrito Federal, porque sabemos que existe caso que está sendo investigado, acompanhado pela Comissão de Prerrogativas, pela OAB do Distrito Federal, justamente de um exemplo disso. Eu não posso dizer que foi um excesso ou não foi, mas levantou a necessidade de uma ação da Ordem dos Advogados do Distrito Federal por conta de ordens judiciais cumpridas em escritórios de advocacia por conta de fatos que vêm desses extremismos e desse uso de tecnologia. E cito um exemplo prático apenas porque estamos num evento da OAB do Distrito Federal, mas são exemplos que têm ocorrido no mundo todo. E, sim, isso afeta diretamente os advogados, porque, como vimos nos demais exemplos de outros países, quando existe a supressão de direitos, a supressão de liberdades, quando existe a censura e que ela é provocada por excessos de uma parte, e aí todos os lados erram, obviamente, mas a população, por conta de, aí usamos o exemplo de 2001, do terrorismo, por conta do medo, as pessoas acabam apoiando esse tipo de autoritarismo, a gente vê, e muitas vezes, os próprios advogados que não compactuam com os extremismos, eles veem com bons olhos, dizem, nesse caso pode acontecer. O problema é que, nesse caso, a gente autoriza, e aí vem os novos casos vêm acontecendo, e quem tem o poder acaba achando, entendendo que está livre, porque tem o apoio para cometer as mais diversas atrocidades, até que chegue nos advogados e em quem representa toda essa nova linha de vítimas, porque a sociedade ela vive em transformação, né? Então, o que era o grupo vulnerável ontem, o que não pode não ser mais ali adiante, as minorias e as maiorias, de acordo com quem está no poder, elas variam. Então, eu quero deixar essa preocupação para que nós, advogados e operadores da justiça, ou defensores de direitos humanos em geral, temos presente começar a pensar formas de a gente também auxiliar os órgãos da justiça, os governos que não sabem hoje como lidar com essas situações, para que a gente consiga ter formas de controle disso sem descambar para o autoritarismo e para a supressão de direitos, porque os direitos, a democracia, a liberdade, os direitos fundamentais devem ser sempre preservados, independente das ameaças que nós temos. Então, agradeço a atenção de todos, parabéns à OAB do Distrito Federal e às comissões por organizar um evento tão importante aqui no Brasil, fico muito satisfeito, e um bom trabalho a todos. Obrigado.
Obrigada, doutor Jean Carboneira. Foi muito interessante a sua fala, chamando a atenção para a necessidade de um órgão tão importante da sociedade civil se posicionar além de ideologias específicas. Em momentos e circunstâncias que se pedem ações veementes, não podem, no entanto, erodir a regra de direito e os nossos princípios constitucionais. Navegar por esses tempos de perplexidade e muito faccionismo político é muito complicado, é uma tarefa muito difícil, acho que todos estamos enfrentando esses dilemas e perplexidades, mas muito bem pontuado. Vale a menção de que o Dr. Jean Carboneira, assim como alguns outros palestrantes, já estiveram na OAB palestrando sobre violação internacional de prerrogativas de advogados numa primeira edição de um evento que fizemos no passado e que hoje, como nossos colaboradores, se firmam como nossos colaboradores históricos e trazem de novo essa contribuição importantíssima. Eu vou passar agora a palavra ao Dr. Mohamed Arafa. Allow me to read a brief curriculum of Mr. Arafa. Mr. Arafa is Professor of Law of the Alexandria University Faculty of Law, Egypt, Adjunct Professor of Law and Clark Initiative Visiting Scholar of Cornell Law School, Visitor in Law and the ILUS, right? Justice Visiting Scholar, Monash University Faculty of Law, Australia. He is also a great friend and a great collaborator of the International Relations Committee of the Brazilian Bar Association, Brazilian section. Please, Mohamed, welcome. The floor is yours. I think you are mute.
Muito obrigado, Clarita. Bom dia a todos. I'm not that good at Brazilian Portuguese, but I caught some good words during my visits to this great country, which I miss a lot. And I probably going to make a short visit, probably in May, hopefully in Salvador. But I'm so happy to be here today. Sorry, I did miss some of the speakers' informative and the great sessions. I do apologize for that because of the timing. Because I'm speaking right now from my timing here in New York because I'm teaching this semester at Cornell. So I do apologize for this. So I don't like to make it long, I assume, because I'm the last speaker because of the time taking. So I know that you've been guys tired and heard a lot of great presentations. So I'll try to keep it a little bit short. And my remarks will mostly going to focus on the situation in the Middle East. Actually, I will be talking about a recent report of mine that coming out soon by the by Cambridge University Press regarding the rule of law in Egypt, specifically, I mean, in the whole region, but I will focus on Egypt since it's home, and you know, it's a kind of an obvious case study in terms of a big violation of the rule of law in the region. So let me start with, so though the rule of law is a keystone of modern democracy, it is often deemed an elusive idea of a contested nature. It has been described as a complicated and in some regards ambiguous concept. It is broadly either considered as a procedural standard when we're talking about what the law is, or as a standard of political morality when we're talking about what the law should be. The Egyptian uprisings highlight the role of the rule of law in people's lives. The rule of law in each nation reflects the degree to which the principles and the norms usually embodied in the state's constitution are applied on the ground. When the people are frustrated because of being poor and the poor situation that they enable the administration accomplishment of these substantial objectives, so it has been of being poor rule of law, this disappointment indicates that the legal community failed to meet the people's needs. Consequently, the Arab world and the Middle Eastern region in general have been asking the legal community to must bear the responsibility of supporting and ensuring the functioning of the rule of law in the region. To create a better rule of law environment in the future, the legal community must learn from its past. To that end, my remarks will focus on some critical analysis to understand the deficiencies of the rule of law in the region, focusing on the situation in Egypt in terms of what has been going on on the ground right now. The selective delegation of policy making to judicial institutions indicates a clear concern of autocratic leaders. The preservation of political legitimacy in the context of the reliable public accountability mechanisms. In numerous cases, dictatorial regimes changed to the rule of law as a legitimizing narrative only after the collapse of their initial policy goals or after popular support for the regime has disappeared. First rule I want to talk about, and the first main violation that the Egyptian regime and most of the Arab regions have been violating, the concept of the checks and balances, in other words, the constitutional separation of powers. Various 2019 amendments within the Egyptian constitution aimed at creating a better allocation of powers within the executive authority by expanding the competencies of the president along with the council of ministers or the secretaries to which it participates in the exercise of the executive authority. Thus, it stipulates that the president shall constitutionally exercise some of his competencies after the consultation and the government approval. The constitutional amendments extended the presidential terms to 6 years each and maintained the previous maximum of 2 consecutive terms, to see how the Arab leaders are enjoying being in power for a long time. Also, they expanded the military role to include safeguarding the constitution and democracy, maintaining the foundations of the state and its civilian nature. The gains of the people and the rights and freedoms of the individuals. The amendments also expand the jurisdiction of the military tribunals over civilians to include those who perpetrate all attacks directed against the military rather than just direct attacks. Further, the amendments empowered the president to appoint the heads of the judicial bodies. For example, the Supreme Constitutional Court or the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, the Chief Justice of those courts, the Attorney General. The head of state also will have to get the government or the prime minister approval upon adopting the regulations for the enforcement of the laws. Accordingly, the constitutional amendments usher in an initial legal system that endangers and infringes the several of Egypt prevailing constitutional duties, along with other countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, including Qatar, including United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait. The amendments intimate to continue and reinforce the tendency reflected across Egypt today and also across the whole MENA region. The military coup that we have been watching at this moment, that led by the president of Tunisia in order to destabilize the democratic transition that have been initiated since the 2011 uprising in the whole region, is a clear example. Thus, those Arab regions that they have severe long-term consequences for destabilization of the rule of law, not only in Egypt, but in the whole region, for the nature of the Egyptian state and others, and its foundational stability and security domestically, regionally, and internationally. Moreover, one of the constitutional reforms objectives was reorganizing the relationship between both the legislative and the executive powers in all these regions in order to achieve greater balance between them. The second thing is a judicial review, which has been used, judiciary right now in all of these regimes, I can say it has been used as a tool to legitimize all of the suppression on all of the political dissent or the political opponents in those countries. So generally, the Egyptian judicial system is based on the French legal concepts and procedures. Judges are familiar with the civil law system's notions of the written codes and apply the law to the facts. Of course, versus the stare decisis, or the main system that we use here in the United States. And despite the huge case backlog and time-consuming proceeding, the due process and judicial review norms are fundamentally cherished and respected only on paper. In Egypt's current legal system, constitutional review is carried out by a special constitutional court, which is the Supreme Constitutional Court, the highest court in the land. The successor establishment of the Supreme Court, established by the Law 81 of 1969 after the adoption of the 1971 Egyptian Constitution by President Sadat. The Supreme Constitutional Court acted to exercise judicial constitutional review over the government actions and to protect the court's authority, to check legal interpretation and the administrative misapplication or any error within the application of the law, which we call the procedural due process, to protect individuals from executive and legislative abuse and safeguard their civil liberties and public rights. The highest court in the land requires that government or political branches act only through the codified constitutional mechanisms and ensure that the government branches remain subject to review, criticism for any inappropriate actions. Historically, in Egypt, the rule of law, at least as envisioned by judges, focuses on accomplishing fairness and equity in application and the interpretation of the law, more than it just making good law. And in this regard, the Constitutional Court ruled in a landmark decision, and I'm quoting the court here: "The scope of power of judicial review applies to law in its wider objective sense, that of legislative text creating general and abstract legal status, whether such texts are enshrined in the status adopted by the legislative power or in a subsidiary status adopted by the executive power within its competence as defined by the Constitution. All such texts are characterized by their vast scope of application and the unlimited number of those subject to them. Moreover, at the European Constitutional Court, the Supreme Constitutional Court in Egypt has constantly held that the Constitution must be interpreted in an organic perspective. The Supreme Constitutional Court here also took remarkably bold stands on most political matters. There were significant limits to the court activism. One of the main things here you can see and is criticized by the international community within the Egyptian government is the emergency law or the Emergency Act. Egypt, between consolidation and fragility, erosion of the law and institutions of government. So now I'm shifting to talk about the legislative failure that Egypt and the other Middle Eastern countries have been experiencing after the Arab Spring or post the Arab Spring. The legislative failure. The Egyptian constitution reads, "The rule of law is the basis of governance in the state. The state is subject to the law, while the independence, immunity, and impartiality of the judiciary are essential guarantees for the protections of rights and freedoms. When we're talking about generally the rule of law idea and applying this concept that the Egyptian constitution have been talking about to the abstract notion of the rule of law itself, we'll find out that the lawmaking quality is critical to the rule of law. It affects the legislation efficiency and offers legal certainty to citizens. Egypt and other Middle Eastern countries follows a civil law system that adheres to a well-established system of codified written statutes. The existing legislative process permits for a change to be available to the citizen, which is a key requirement to observe the rule of law. However, passed bills and enacted law often fail to meet clarity, explicitly, and certainty standards. In the same context, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, acknowledged that Egypt's lack of a regular systemic review of legislation results in an accumulation of outdated legislation, and it demonstrates that the development of legislation does not adequately assess the necessity of adoption of new legislation or considers alternatives. The accumulation of legislation results in different paradigm and the degradation of legal certainty, with the law unable to fulfill its primary duty to identify the citizens about their rights and their liberties and their obligations accurately. Accordingly, Egypt faces difficulties in creating predictable lawmaking. And we have a lot of examples on that when we're talking about the criminal law of Egypt, when we're talking about the criminal procedure code. All of that lacks a lot of the constitutional protection, is specifically in terms of the due process guarantees when we're talking about the extension of the pretrial detention period of time, and in terms of the non-availability of some remedies when some cases have to be reversed or sent to be retried. So there have been a lot of violations regarding that. Therefore, Egypt and other Middle Eastern countries' unpredictable legislation give rise to an unfair power, forceful, while the governments anticipate its people to follow the law, punishing a failure to do so. The government per se can undermine their legal duties, leaving them uncontrolled and susceptible to unpredictability and arbitrariness. Prosecutors and judges kept numerous individuals in pretrial detention, as I said, as a punitive measure without even a pretense of judicial review, often solely and held incommunicado for exercising their rights to peaceful assembly or freedom of expression or free expression, and many beyond the 2-year limit that already provided by the law. The emergency law and the use of arbitrary power. The emergency law in Egypt overly expands police and security power. Additionally, it halts constitutional rights as it authorizes exceptional courts, or what we call emergency state or security courts, whose military judges and officers are appointed by the president to try individuals without any appeal, in which the regime has exploited this law under the guise of public security, making the emergency status a norm rather than an exception. Since 2017, a lot of Middle Eastern governments has extended the emergency status, many unreasonable times, to authorize military prosecutors to interpret whether a specific criminal act falls within the military jurisdiction, conferring a substantial amount of discretion. In 2019, Article 204 of the Egyptian Constitution was amended to state that the military tribunals will have jurisdictions over crimes committed by civilians that represent an assault against the military facilities, equipment, weapons, documents, and public funds, among many other things, removing the pre-amendment requirement that such assault be direct. So it seems that all of these regimes is vigorously trying to undermine the judicial system integrity and transparency and the constitutional limits, on their powers, and that these administrations is using this tool to just expand their suppression instead of reform. Is the judiciary above politics or a political theater in that region? Under those regimes right now, I can say that, I mean, according to Bentham third principles, in terms of the rule of law and the clarification of the rule of law, that everyone should be equal before the law unless a reasonable or objective ground justify any inequality. And hence there have been two critical consequences regarding this. One, no one, including powerful actors, should be above the law. And two, no citizen should experience discrimination based on personal or subjective aspects. Unfortunately, security forces and the intelligence community remain to operate with near absolute impunity. Likewise, legal prejudice based on political beliefs is a concerning feature of the current administrations in the region. The regimes, or those regimes, utilizes the law and judicial authority to promote a pervasive crackdown on political dissidents, such as human rights lawyers, journalists, activists, and political figures, specifically reporters. Under those governments, legislations and laws is progressively infringing on the citizen rights. For example, the anti-protest law in 2013 in Egypt, and also the NGO law in 2019, and others. Media laws, they have been also restricting a lot of media platforms within the Egyptian administration. In terms of the violation of the international commitments that Egypt is already committed to. Also, within the literature, Bentham fifth principles required that the law must afford ample protection of basic human rights. In this regard, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights reads, "No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishments," and prohibits any form of discrimination based on subjective factors. We can say that the conditions, for example, when we're talking about the physical conditions in prisons in Egypt and other Arab countries and detention centers were very severe and possibly life-threatening due to overcrowding, physical torture, psychological abuse, and insufficient medical care, and the poor infrastructure and ventilation with no proper hygiene or food or no proper potable water. It should be noted that the Egyptian prison system falls short for the international standards regarding the standard minimum rules for prisoners' treatment, 1975. Under international law, procedures constraining rudimentary rights or fundamental rights during an emergency should be necessary, set out in the law, limited in time and place to what is severely necessary, proportionate, and provide for effective remedies for any violations of rights, such as an independent, transparent appeal mechanism. It comes to us also when we're talking about the fair trials, when we're talking about the standards already, which according to the international norms, everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in determination of his rights and obligations and of any criminal charges against him or charge against him. And that's absolutely one of the main things that a lot of countries in the region violated this rule. So they do not guarantee any fair standards in terms of due process. And this already violate and deny the Egyptian citizens and other citizens in the region their basic right to just trial and to pause a disturbing intrusion to the judicial autonomy. Many of the accused, for example, do not have sufficient time and facilities to prepare for defense. The evidence against them is essentially not shared with them, nor their attorneys or lawyers, and they are systematically denied access to case files or to information. That also will reflect how Egypt and other Middle Eastern countries are not in compliance with the international law norms. Egyptian constitution even said the state shall be bound by the international human rights agreements, covenants, and conventions ratified by Egypt and shall have the force of law after publication in accordance with the prescribed conditions. Further, the President of the Republic represents the state in foreign relation and concludes treaties and ratifies, etc., specifically in terms of foreign policy. So when it comes even to how the rule of law already is not in shape to conclude with, you will see that those regimes have been marked as a turning point for the rule of law and democratization promotion in the region. You will see a lot of breaches for the main concept of the rule of law itself through the unfair trials, through the non-independence of the judiciary, and through other tools. As I mentioned, emergency law, as I also mentioned, the prisoner's law and others. So you will see a lot of violation in terms of that. For sake of time also, I don't like to go through the whole things, but also I think it is important to make sure when we're talking about reforming the rule of law that these regions should guarantee a quick and a steady transition of public authority to the check and balances and the separation of power constitutional norms, along with the judicial review on the governmental actions through legitimate and fair processes consistent with the rule of law principles and international standards. Ensure the right of all citizens in those countries to contribute within the political spectrum and public sphere, and that the Constitution is entirely in line with international law. Provide for legislative civil oversight and other mechanisms over financial and budgetary issues, and end any executive hegemony or any undue influence over the judiciary. Within the United States foreign policy in the Middle East to enhance the rule of law, the U.S. foreign policy in the region has proven to be business as usual for the Biden administration, though ostensibly presented as a break from the Trump administration embrace of the region's autocratic leaders. Biden has stressed democracy and the rule of law as a linchpin of the United States contest with the global rise of autocracy, specifically in the MENA region. Indeed, he vowed to lead the world on advancing human rights and scorned authoritarians of the world who may seek to proclaim the end of the age of democracy. However, the administration continues to be captivated by the strident calls of defense industry profits. On September 21st, 2021, President Biden, before the 76th sessions of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, said, "Will we affirm and uphold the human dignity and human rights under which nations in common cause more than 7 decades ago formed this institution, United Nations? Will we apply and strengthen the core tenets of the international system, including the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? We will continue to uphold the long-standing rules and norms that have formed the guardians of the international engagements for decades, that have been essential to the development of nations around the world. Bedrock commitments like adherence to international laws and treaties, support for arms controls measures that reduce the risk and enhance transparency. As leaders, it is our duty to answer that call, not to silence it, to find ways to respond to the advance of human dignity around the world." He also said, "As we pursue diplomacy across the board, the United States will champion the democratic values that go to the very heart of who are as a nation and people: freedom, equality, opportunity, and a belief in the universal rights of all people." With that, I'm concluding my speech and I look forward for your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. This is a very worrisome scenario you have just pictured.
Thank you.
I have plenty of questions.
Oh, wow.
But should we hold them to the end of the seminar? We still have one presentation, right?
Oh, sure.
This presentation will be made, was recorded. Sophie de Graaf from Lawyers couldn't attend the event synchronically, so she sent a video that I now pass to you. Just a second. Let us see it. Can you see the video? Right.
Yeah, I do.
Everyone. I would like to thank Clarita Costamaya and the other members of the Commission of the International Relations for the invitation to take part in today's session. My name is Sophie de Graaf and I am the Executive Director of the Dutch organization Lawyers for Lawyers. The topic of the session today, the violation of immunities and privileges for lawyers around the world, is at the heart of my organization's mission. I'm therefore very pleased to be here, although remotely. Today, I would like to tell you more about the situation of lawyers in some Latin American countries, with a special focus on Colombia. Before I do so, let me first say a few words about our organization, Lawyers for Lawyers. I will also share some slides. Lawyers for Lawyers is an independent, non-profit lawyers organization. We're based in the Netherlands, but we're operating globally. Our organization consists of practicing lawyers who promote the common values of lawyers and their contribution to the justice system. We stand up for colleague lawyers around the world who are hindered or threatened for simply doing their job. Lawyers for Lawyers was formally established in 1986. Our mission and vision have basically remained the same, but our activities have increased significantly. Before I tell you what we do, I will briefly explain what our organization stands for. Our mission is to promote and protect the independence of the legal profession through the support and empowerment of lawyers who face reprisals and improper interferences because of their work. Why is the independence of lawyers so important? Lawyers play a vital role in the protection of the rule of law and human rights. Their work is indispensable for the public confidence in the judicial system and for ensuring effective access to justice for all. That lawyers can only play their vital role effectively if they are able to exercise the professional duties freely and independently, thus without improper interferences or fear of reprisals. A legal profession which is controlled, manipulated, or intimidated by politicians or any other third party cannot effectively carry out its duty of sustaining the rule of law and the independence of administration of justice. What are effective guarantees for the functioning of lawyers? In our work, we refer to internationally recognized human rights laws and standards, including the United Nations Basic Principles on the Role of Lawyers. The UN Basic Principles on the Role of Lawyers are formulated to assist member states of the UN in their task of promoting and ensuring the proper role of lawyers. They contain a very concise overview of the necessary immunities and privileges to enable lawyers to do their job freely and independently. Around the world, however, states fail to adopt, implement, or enforce effective guarantees for the proper functioning of lawyers. As a result, lawyers are harassed, threatened, and attacked for simply doing their job. Acts of harassment and attacks against lawyers include killings, death threats, intimidation, attacks on their physical integrity and reputation, as well as forced disappearances and deportations. Lawyers also increasingly face arbitrary arrest, prosecution, and detention, as well as abuse of disciplinary proceedings, including disbarment. It is telling that the United Nations Human Rights Council issued several statements on the independence of judges and lawyers. In its statement, the Council expressed its concern for a growing number of attacks against lawyers and instances of arbitrary or unlawful interference with or restrictions to the free practice of their profession. The Council of Europe has also raised the alarm. Generally, Europe is seen as a region with a high level of rule of law and democracy. But even the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly expressed its concern that, I quote, harassment, threats, and attacks against lawyers continue to happen in many member states of the Council of Europe and are even increasing in some of them, unquote. These developments are also reflected in the work of Lawyers for Lawyers. the volume and complexity of the requests and demands that we get from lawyers at risk have increased significantly. So what do we do? To achieve our mission, we basically do two things. First, we provide individual and structural support to lawyers at risk. And secondly, we raise awareness of the importance of the independent functioning of lawyers for upholding the rule of law and the protection of human rights. With respect to all our activities, we want to be sure that what we do is useful, that we meet expressed needs of lawyers, and that we choose for the most effective ways to achieve tangible impact and lasting progress in a given situation. For this reason, we consult with the lawyers concerned or their representatives, as well as with other stakeholders on an ongoing basis. Around the world, lawyers continue to tell us that two things are especially important: that governments receive permanent reminders that the international community is watching, and that lawyers who work in challenging environments receive both moral as well as practical support. And to address these needs, Lawyers for Lawyers provides a range of measures and tools through three programs: Defend, Empower, and Influence. Through our Defend program, we generate international attention and advocate for individual cases of lawyers under threat. We write letters to the authorities of the home country of the lawyer. We organize social media campaigns, issue statements and press releases, or engage with governments, international institutions, and bar associations. We also monitor and highlight violations of lawyers' professional immunities and privileges, including through trial observation and fact-finding missions, and we conduct advocacy on targeted impunity cases. In each case, we seek to offer tailor-made support, and we invite lawyers at risk to come to Europe to give them a platform. We organize panel discussions and private meetings with country delegations at the United Nations in Geneva, at the OCSE, or with politicians or members of parliament in the Netherlands, the Council of Europe, or the EU, as well as with the media. Secondly, we empower lawyers and lawyers' associations to fulfill their role in upholding human rights and freedoms. For example, by sharing best practices on the core values and ethics underpinning the legal profession, or by providing interactive training sessions and resource materials on international human rights law and mechanisms for the protection of human rights. Through our Influence program, we advocate for laws, policies, and practices that provide or reinforce effective protections for the independent functioning and safety of lawyers. We do this by engaging with international bodies such as the United Nations and their mechanisms, including through participation in the Universal Periodic Review. We also submit reports to the Human Rights Committee, the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and we engage with United Nations Special Rapporteurs. Since 2013, we have special consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. It is often hard to tell whether, and if so, to what extent our activities make a difference. But lawyers who we support tell us that we do have a positive impact. First of all, because they feel morally supported, but also because their personal situation has changed for the better. Let me give you a few concrete examples. The Lawyers for Lawyers Award. Every 2 years, we grant the Lawyers for Lawyers Award to a lawyer or a group of lawyers who defend human rights in an exceptional way and are threatened as a result thereof. Our award winners are lawyers from Zimbabwe, the Russian Federation, Colombia, Thailand, Turkey, and Belarus. We also nominate lawyers for other prestigious human rights awards. Winner of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Award in 2017, Turkish lawyer Ramazan Demir was nominated by Lawyers for Lawyers. They all told us that winning the award not only has given them personally a morale boost, but also their colleagues, and that it also created international recognition and awareness, as well as protective publicity in their home countries. I would like to show a short movie where some of the winners will explain the effects of winning the Lawyers for Lawyers Award themselves.
I practice law in Zimbabwe. In the field of human rights, I represent mainly people who have been arrested for allegedly wanting to overthrow the government.
I work to represent and defend people who prosecuted after the coup d'etat in 2014 with the organization I co-founded called Thai Lawyers for Human Rights.
Я помогаю клиентам-мусульманам, которые являются жертвами репрессий в Кабардино-Балкарии на Северном Кавказе.
Pues en este momento estamos llevando casos de ejecuciones de ciudadanos indefensos. Que fueron asesinados por personal del Ejército Nacional.
I am here today to represent Selçuk Kozarçlı, who is the president of my association. Currently, Selçuk is in prison and under isolation. This isolation really affects him. He was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months.
The state, because of the work that we do, tend to associate us with the cause of our clients, which is very unfortunate.
I was charged with basically refusing to open my vehicle to the authority to search for my client's belongings without a court warrant at night.
Я сталкиваюсь с угрозами и насилием в связи с моей работой, в том числе угрозами смертью. Мне разбили ногу во время очень подозрительного столкновения с машиной.
Cada 4 días está siendo asesinado un defensor de derechos humanos.
Myself, I've been arrested 3 times over the past 10 years.
So there was only one event that happened, but it led to 3 different criminal cases against me.
Hace 1 mes y medio hemos recibido la información que al interior del Ejército Nacional ya se habría dado la orden de asesinar.
When I received the Lawyers for Lawyers Award in April 2011, I was involved in representing numerous people who were falsely accused by the state.
Such an award means that international legal community knows that he's not a terrorist, he's not a criminal, but he's a human rights defender, and also it means that he's not alone. To also tell the authorities and the Thai military government, that many others from outside of Thailand are watching.
Да, определенно помогло. Прямые угрозы больше не поступают. Премия адвокатов для адвокатов работает как сдерживающий фактор.
Knowing the international community is watching, at least affects or forces the judges to apply the basic rules.
Contribuye a que podamos permanecer en el país desarrollando nuestro trabajo.
We have to break the wall of silence. As we defend others, we also have to protect one of us as well.
Nominations for the Lawyers for Lawyers Award 2023 are open now until the 20th of February. If you would like to nominate a lawyer, please visit our website to find the nomination form. Lawyers for Lawyers also engages in trial monitoring. Since 2011, we have sent each year several trial observation teams to Turkey to monitor hearings in cases where lawyers are on trial for reasons that are connected with exercising their legitimate professional activities. We do this together with representatives from bar associations and lawyers organizations from various countries, including the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Norway. Lawyers in Turkey are subject to arbitrary arrests, prosecution, and detention. In many cases, the victims are lawyers who represent people who are considered enemies of the state, such as people who are accused under counterterrorism laws or who have been critical to the government's policies or behavior, including journalists and opposition leaders. Through our presence, we make the participants, and particularly the court or judge and prosecutor, aware that they are under the scrutiny of the international community and thereby encourage them to act in the proceedings according to fair trial standards. At the same time, also the lawyers on trial felt morally supported by our presence. In a letter they wrote to us, they said, "Knowing and seeing that you were there for us during the hearings strengthened our belief for law, justice, and solidarity." The last 2 years, we had a dedicated campaign for lawyers who were sentenced to long prison sentences, the Free the Lawyers campaign. One of the actions under this campaign was to ask our network to send greeting cards to lawyers in prison. Many of the lawyers received many cards from their colleagues abroad. This lifted their spirits and showed solidarity. Any lawyer can contribute in this campaign. So if you would like to join this campaign too, please visit our website and see who you can send a card to. In recent years, we also organized fact-finding missions to the Ukraine and the Philippines, and we participated in 7 missions to Colombia, the so-called Caravana de Juristas. According to Colombian lawyers, it is impossible to overemphasize the importance of international attention, such as through the Caravana de Juristas. One lawyer told us that with this support, they are in a stronger position to confront the authorities with regard to their security risks. I would now like to address the situation of lawyers in some Latin American countries that Lawyers for Lawyers has supported. We supported lawyers in many Latin American countries, but we had a big emphasis on Colombia. Lawyers for Lawyers has been closely monitoring the situation of lawyers in Colombia for many years. In those years, we have built relationships with several Colombian lawyers and other stakeholders. We continue to be very concerned about the situation of lawyers in Colombia. In August 2022, Lawyers for Lawyers traveled to Colombia with the latest Caravana de Juristas mission. In its first conclusions, the Caravana mission explained that it remains concerned about the attacks on lawyers. There are worrying patterns that prevent the free exercise of the legal profession, such as wiretapping carried out by state agents, the stigmatization of legal defense work by conflating lawyers with their clients, the criminalization of human rights defenders, lawyers, and judges through vexatious litigations, and the absence of adequate protection frameworks, both at the individual and collective level. Especially human rights lawyers who defend political prisoners, persons reporting human rights violations, or victims of land grabbing in remote areas are at risk. The Caravana furthermore expressed deep concerns about serious threats to the rule of law that limit access to justice, the repression of political participation and social protest, and the lack of security guarantees for those carrying out vital human rights work in Colombia. In November 2022, we invited Colombian human rights lawyer Adil Melendez to come to the Netherlands. He told us that lawyers are associated with the parties they defend. Adil is facing threats and difficulties in connection to his professional activities. In theory, lawyers can request government protection, but despite the creation of an official protection unit, lawyers are still not adequately protected. In cases where protective measures were ordered, those measures were not always implemented, or they have been insufficient or ineffective. Some lawyers have armed bodyguards, but they are only on duty in hometowns, while lawyers have to travel to various parts of the country to represent clients. It also does not help that attacks against lawyers often remain unpunished. Impunity of such acts has a chilling effect on other lawyers. Because of the great personal risk, many lawyers refrain from working in the field of human rights, and this seriously impedes access to justice for citizens. Lawyers for Lawyers is therefore committed to continue its work for Colombian lawyers. We plan on submitting a report to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the upcoming Universal Periodic Review of Colombia, and we are working on that report. In the last years, Lawyers for Lawyers has also supported lawyers from other Latin American countries, including Honduras, Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, and Guatemala. Moreover, 6 months ago, we launched our Environmental Lawyers campaign. In recent years, attacks against environmental lawyers have increased significantly. These attacks include acts of intimidation, assault, enforced disappearance, unlawful detention, violations of private and family life, and in worst cases, even the killing of lawyers. In order to provide public recognition and support to environmental lawyers at risk, we have launched this one-year campaign. The campaign aims to raise international attention on environmental lawyers who are being intimidated, harassed, or are otherwise at risk because of their work. We want to provide these lawyers with moral and practical support through a series of actions, including statements, individual petitions, and submissions. The purpose of this campaign is also to reduce acts of harassment against environmental lawyers by sending the message to national governments that the international community is watching. And finally, the campaign aims to create more international solidarity and knowledge amongst environmental lawyers by sharing success stories, e.a. successful cases taken up by environmental lawyers. For this campaign, we have interviewed lawyers from Honduras, Mexico, and Colombia. We would also be honored to interview a lawyer from Brazil for this campaign. Feel free to reach out to me for more information if this is of interest to you or someone you know. I'm happy to provide you with more details on our work in Latin America or other countries. Please feel free to contact me. You can find our contact details on this sheet, but Clarita Costamaya also has my personal details. I look forward to further discussing this important topic and to learn more about the situation of lawyers in your country. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and thank you very much for your attention.
Well, we reached the end of the presentations and we will now pass to a Q&A session. Nós vamos abrir agora para uma sessão de perguntas e respostas. Eu não vejo no canal YouTube, no chat do YouTube, nenhuma pergunta da audiência para os participantes. Pergunta quem está inscrito no YouTube se quer fazer da palavra e dirigir uma pergunta a um dos participantes que esteja ainda online. Deixe-me ver no chat. Alguém? Alguém deseja fazer alguma pergunta para um dos participantes? I myself have a question, Mohammed.
Sure.
And the situation in Egypt. Oh, sorry. Before that, Renata, por favor, você levantou a mão, Renata Barrampur, por gentileza. A palavra é sua.
Muito obrigada, doutora Clarita. Muito bom dia a todos e a todas aqui. Eu pergunto, fala português mesmo? Fala inglês? Como ficaria melhor assim para todo mundo?
Olha, a maior parte dos participantes fala inglês, né? Então, talvez dirija a sua pergunta em inglês, depois traduza brevemente em português para todo mundo seguir, né? Os que não...
So actually, it's just more comment and share some situation on regarding the situation of Baha'is in Iran and the situation of lawyers of Baha'is. So just a brief introduction. My name is Renata Barrampur, and I'm a member of the Office of External Affairs of the Baha'i Community of Brazil. And I'm also a lawyer here in Federal District. As a subject of today's event is about the prerogative of lawyers, I think it is extremely important that we consider the issue of legal certainty for our work, right? So in this issue, I think it's important to say that right after the Islamic Revolution, Baha'is have been subject to systematic religious persecution sponsored by the Iranian state. And when we analyze the context in which Baha'is are found in Iran, we are necessarily talking about a generalized context of legal uncertainty and disrespect for due process of law. I mean, Dr. Shirin Abad knows well that what I'm talking about here because she herself has acted as a lawyer in cases involving Baha'is, including in emblematic cases. Baha'is are constantly arrested and arbitrarily persecuted, you know, and it is not uncommon that when arrested, they are taken to, for example, unknown places, that the families do not have information about their whereabouts, or that it is not known what accusation led to the arrest. And also Baha'is are also subjected to torture at the time of arrest or while when they are in jail. And in several cases, they remain prison for long periods of time without a hearing, a judicial hearing. And something that is extremely serious is that in many cases, Baha'is are denied access to lawyer, or denied that they choose their own lawyer. They say it ends up being the one who determining which lawyer will act in that case, and which is from the list of lawyers linked to the government. And when a Baha'i obtains the right to have a lawyer of his own choice, that lawyer is usually denied access to the case file, or is also prevented from talking to his client, to their client. And this is very, very serious. And when a bail is possible, when Baha'i can pay for a bail, usually this bail is very high in terms of value. And when the Baha'i pays for this bail, sometimes the Baha'i can be released from the prison. So, for example, in last December of last year, there was a case of a Baha'i called Zabihi Moghadam, and she was arrested. And during the trial, the judge denied the request for bail. And he even told her that the laws do not apply to the situation of Baha'is. So I would like to join actually Dr. Shirin Zabadi's request regarding support, regarding that Brazilian lawyers support and defend Iranian lawyers. I also call the attention of the OAB on these violations to Baha'is and to lawyers of Baha'is as well. For example, a lawyer called Dr. Abdul Fattah Soltani and also Dr. Mahnaz Parakandi, because they are being persecuted for acting in Baha'i cases, and many others who suffer persecution for defending Baha'is too. And also it's important that the OAB involves the Brazilian government in this issue, mainly Ministry of Foreign Affairs in particular, so that it pressures the Iranian state to respect human rights treaties, right? And these violations suffered by Baha'is and their lawyers, it is also shared by all Iranians. And I also would like to make myself available to work together with all of you, with OAB on this issue.
Doutora Renata, agora eu te pediria para traduzir para o português. Nós temos o privilégio de termos presente o doutor Newton Rubens, que é o presidente de Prerrogativas. Se você lembrar de toda a sua... Pode falar com vagar e com riqueza de detalhes.
Tá ótimo. Então, o que eu estava falando em inglês, que eu espero lembrar, é que, bom, eu me chamo Renata Barrampur e eu sou membro do Escritório de Assuntos Externos da Comunidade Bahá'í do Brasil, e eu sou advogada aqui no Distrito Federal. E como o tema do nosso painel é sobre a prerrogativas de advogados, eu acho que é extremamente importante a gente considerar a questão da segurança jurídica para o nosso trabalho. E aí, com relação a isso, é importante, e aí eu faço uma pequena explicação de que sobre as violações relacionadas à situação de Bahá'ís no Irã, que são seguidores da religião Bahá'í, e que logo depois da Revolução Islâmica de 79, os Bahá'ís têm sido submetidos a uma perseguição religiosa sistemática que é patrocinada pelo Estado iraniano, né? E quando a gente analisa o contexto em que os Bahá'ís estão inseridos no Irã, a gente está necessariamente falando de um contexto generalizado de insegurança jurídica e de desrespeito ao devido processo legal. E a doutora Shirin Ebadi sabe bem do que eu estou dizendo, porque ela mesma já atuou como advogada em casos, em processos envolvendo Baha'is, inclusive em casos emblemáticos. E os Baha'is são, assim, constantemente presos e processados de maneira arbitrária. Então, não é incomum, por exemplo, que quando os Baha'is são presos, eles sejam levados a lugares desconhecidos que as famílias não têm informação sobre o paradeiro deles, ou que também não se saiba qual a acusação que levou a essa prisão. E também os Baha'is acabam sendo submetidos à tortura no momento da prisão, e também quando estão na cadeia. E em vários casos eles permanecem, assim, por longos períodos de prisão, sem que tenha havido uma audiência, seja de custódia ou de qualquer outro tipo, né? E outra questão que é muito grave, que realmente preciso pontuar, é que, em muitos casos, aos Baha'is é negado acesso a um advogado, ou é negado que ele escolha o seu próprio advogado. No fim, é o Estado quem acaba determinando qual advogado vai atuar, e esse advogado vem do rol de advogados ligado ao governo. E aí, quando o Baha'i consegue o direito de ter um advogado da sua própria escolha, esse advogado costuma ser impedido de ter acesso aos autos do processo ou também é impedido de conversar com o cliente. E isso, no fim, viabiliza completamente o exercício do princípio do contraditório da ampla defesa, né? E um outro ponto também importante de destacar aqui é que quando é possível que haja o pagamento da fiança por parte dos Baha'is, esses valores estão estipulados de maneira, assim, muito alta. E quando os Baha'is pagam a fiança, por vezes eles ainda não são liberados. O Estado retém o dinheiro. Então, por exemplo, no mês passado, no mês de dezembro do ano passado, teve um caso de uma Baha'i chamada Zabih Mogadam, que ela havia sido presa e durante o julgamento dela, o juiz negou o pedido de fiança e ainda falou para ela que as leis não se aplicam à situação dos Baha'is. E aí, com isso, eu aproveito para fazer coro ao pedido da doutora Shirin Ebadi de que os advogados brasileiros levantem a voz para defender os advogados iranianos. E aí eu aproveito também para chamar a atenção da OAB sobre essas violações aos Baha'is e aos advogados de Baha'is também, como o advogado doutor Abdul Fattah Solutani e também da advogada doutora Marnaz Parakand, que são perseguidos por terem atuado em processos de Baha'is e também em casos de outros advogados que sofrem perseguição por defenderem Baha'is, né? Isso, inclusive, implica na dificuldade que Baha'is têm de conseguirem advogados porque esses advogados têm medo de sofrer retaliação ou perseguição. Então, acho também que é importante que o governo brasileiro seja acionado, principalmente o Ministério das Relações Exteriores, e que o governo pressione o Estado iraniano para respeitar os tratados de direitos humanos, né? Porque, no fim, essas violações que são sofridas pelos Baha'is e pelos advogados de Baha'is são compartilhadas por todos os iranianos e iranianas, e aqui também me coloco à disposição para a gente trabalhar nisso juntos e juntas. Então, foi mais ou menos isso que eu falei em inglês.
Doutor Newton, o senhor deseja responder ou fazer algum comentário sobre?
Doutora Renata, doutora Clarita, os desafios são muito grandes. Lembro de um grande advogado do Brasil, medalha Rui Barbosa, que a gente chama no Conselho Federal, né, que é a maior honraria que um advogado pode receber da advocacia. Ele diz que a advocacia é resistência. E sempre assim será, enquanto a advocacia se postar diante de qualquer autoridade para defender as liberdades e as garantias fundamentais de qualquer cidadão. E nós, aqui no Brasil, nós temos uma proteção especial constitucional para a advocacia. A Constituição Federal, ou seja, a nossa Carta Magna, a lei das leis, prevê que o advogado é essencial à administração da justiça E ele, né, no segundo binômio desse artigo 133, diz que o advogado é imune por fala e por ações, que traz ali um direito de imunidade, né, para a advocacia. Isso desde a Constituição de 1988. E nós temos a Lei 8.906, que é o nosso estatuto, com um aspecto importante de proteção das prerrogativas da advocacia, mas nem por isso a gente está imune às violações de prerrogativas. Estive no Pará, né, um estado aqui do Brasil que é imenso, são mais de 1.000 quilômetros de distância dentro de um único estado, em que, na gestão anterior, doutora Clarita, foram 13 homicídios praticados contra advogados. E nós não estamos falando de autoridades que mataram advogados. Nós estamos falando do simples fato do advogado ingressar com uma ação contra um madeireiro, contra um garimpeiro, que infelizmente nós estamos vendo isso, essa chaga no norte do nosso país, e que é criminoso. E quando o advogado se põe em favor de algum trabalhador naquele estado contra esse tipo de pessoa, ele é violentamente levado a óbito, né? Com um homicídio. Isso é muito triste, é muito difícil de lidar, a ponto de que a OAB, a Ordem dos Advogados do Pará, pediu ao Conselho Federal, doutora Clarita, um veículo blindado para a proteção das prerrogativas do advogado naquele estado. E nós não estamos falando só assim fora do Brasil, na América Latina. Nós estamos falando dentro do Brasil, num estado que já há mais de 30 anos vivemos sob uma democracia, com a Constituição republicana, com leis que garantem a proteção especial do advogado, e nem por isso estamos imunes a esse tipo de violação de prerrogativas, desse tipo de violência, eu diria até contra a humanidade, porque, afinal de contas, a defesa das prerrogativas, ela só tem um único propósito: defender o constituinte, defender o cidadão contra a arbitrariedade do Estado, contra o abuso de autoridade e assim por diante. Penso que, de alguma forma, sem dúvida nenhuma, o nosso Conselho Federal, e eu posso levar isso à comissão, no Colégio de Presidentes de Prerrogativas, essa proposta de moção e proteção e intervenção em favor dos advogados que atuam no Irã, em favor dos Bahais, doutora Renata, sem dúvida nenhuma, porque, afinal de contas, a luta, ela transcende, sem dúvida nenhuma, os países. Não estamos, como eu falei, imunes a esses problemas. Ontem mesmo nós discutimos a possibilidade de aplicação de multa a um advogado pelo juiz. Ora, se o advogado ele se põe diante de um juiz, porque ele eventualmente pode ser a autoridade coatora, a autoridade que venha a violar algum direito de algum advogado, de algum cidadão, a possibilidade de um juiz aplicar multa ao advogado fere, sem dúvida nenhuma, o livre exercício do advogado. Como o advogado vai se colocar diante daquele magistrado, sendo que ele pode eventualmente aplicar-lhe uma multa? E nós estamos falando só de uma multa. Imaginemos os casos de prisão de advogado irregular, prisões arbitrárias e até mesmo a morte de algum colega advogado, ou se colocar como tortura, né? É realmente lamentável que ainda se tenha isso no mundo, mas contra essas arbitrariedades que a advocacia se põe com bastante resistência. A nós, né, aí, diria que desde Rui Barbosa, há mais de 100 anos atrás, o nosso patrono da advocacia aqui, nós estamos em resistência e continuaremos assim, firmes e fortes.
Muito obrigada, doutor Newton. Chegamos ao final do evento. Aqueles que tiverem dúvidas e quiserem endereçá-las por e-mail, meu e-mail é maiaclarita@gmail.com. Eu encaminho as perguntas aos participantes e nós publicaremos na página da OAB-DF, na seção apropriada, a seção da Comissão de Relações Internacionais, as respostas aí disponíveis para todos. Eu agradeço a todos os palestrantes, a toda a audiência e esperamos, analisaremos, doutora Renata e demais palestrantes, todos os encaminhamentos aqui propostos. O objetivo final, maior desse evento foi, sim, abrir uma via de cooperação e diálogo com os nossos pares internacionais, para que juntos reforcemos a luta pelas prerrogativas dos advogados e com isso reforçar a luta em prol da regra de direito, né, no mundo inteiro. Então, muito obrigada a todos pela audiência e até o próximo evento da Comissão de Relações Internacionais e também da Comissão de Prerrogativas da OAB-DF. Bom dia.
Bom dia.